Welcome to the Y Central Safeguarding Induction Training. This video will give you a quick insight into safeguarding and child protection at the Y. Following this video, you will have basic knowledge of how to recognise child abuse, how to respond to it, who to report to, and how to record it. You will then be asked to complete a more comprehensive 4-hour e-learning after you've completed this induction training. Safeguarding and child protection are two words that you've probably heard used interchangeably. Let's start with looking at what the difference between safeguarding and child protection is. When we talk about safeguarding, we're talking about a much larger area than we are child protection. As you can see from our diagram, child protection is actually one part of safeguarding. Safeguarding is about creating an environment that protects and safeguards our children, young people and the staff. So it's everything that we do within the YMCA to ensure that we create a safe environment. That includes our staff conduct, how we train staff, recruitment practices, health and safety, staff attitudes, our physical environments, the policies and procedures we use. Child protection is a part of safeguarding, and that is protecting children that are being abused or are likely to be abused. So, as you can tell from this, it's a much smaller part of the population. Safeguarding is everybody's responsibility and covers everybody who is part of the YMCA. Child protection is a much smaller area, and this training will cover how we recognise child abuse, how we respond to it, and how we report and record it. Let's start with the rights of a child. So, according to the United Nations, every child has the right to a childhood free from harm. The Orangatamaki Act in Section 2 defines child abuse as the harming, whether physically, emotionally, sexually, ill treatment, abuse, neglect, or deprivation of any child or young person. At the Y, we want to uphold the rights of a child and create an environment where every child does have a childhood free from harm. Let's have a look at some of the statistics for us here in New Zealand. We have some of the worst statistics in the world for child abuse. New Zealand ranks 35th out of 41 OECD countries for child abuse. In New Zealand, approximately one child dies every 5 weeks from maltreatment. A child is admitted to hospital every second day with injuries from assault, neglect, or maltreatment. And New Zealand's rate for teen suicides, so those aged 15 to 19, is the highest of the 41 OECD and EU countries included. Here at the Y, we have large numbers of children and young people coming through our services, whether in OSCAR programs, early childhood, alternative education, sport and recreation programs, or even in our fitness centres. So it's likely that we will see children who fall into these statistics, and it's our responsibility to be able to provide a safe environment for them and to be able to identify abuse that we see happening. One of the biggest myths about child abuse is that the dangers to children come from strangers. We've all heard those stories about stranger danger and the man in the van. And they are legitimate fears, and we need to teach our children about stranger danger. However, in most cases, the perpetrator is someone that the parent and child knows and is often trusted by the child and family. It may be a teacher, a next door neighbour, a sports coach, a parent, or other family member. So what is your role when it comes to child abuse? We have a duty of care to all children, not just those in our care. So a child should be able to expect to trust you and that you will keep them safe from harm. This includes reporting if you are concerned that they might be being abused. If you do suspect child abuse, then there's 4 R's that we need to follow. The First is recognizing abuse, responding to the child, reporting, and recording. Let's look at recognizing first. So there's 4 main types of abuse: emotional abuse, physical abuse, neglect, and sexual abuse. There are some more types of abuse up here, but they do fall into those 4 main types, and I have color-coded accordingly. Family violence is there, it's blue, as it is emotional harm, but can also fall under physical abuse and sometimes sexual abuse as well. Sexual exploitation also falls into sexual abuse, and we often see that in our older children and young people. I've also put bullying there, as it can be a form of abuse and can fall into some of those categories as well. Let's look at emotional abuse first. So this is when a child is being emotionally abused. So that could be yelled at, ridiculed, put down. Oftentimes we might see a child who has little to no self-worth or self-esteem. They're often withdrawn, and sometimes they can show psychosomatic illnesses. That is where they complain of being sick, but there is no symptoms to go along with that. You might often see that they are treated differently to other children within the same family, and there might not be a very good bond between them and other family members. Physical abuse is when a child is being physically abused. So indicators may be things like bruising, cuts, scrapes on the body. Children might wear long-sleeved tops and long pants even in the height of summer because they don't want to show marks on their body. It's important to not jump to conclusions. Young people are very active and they do come with cuts and scrapes and so on. Where it raises a red flag is when it happens in areas that's not easy for a child to get injuries. Bony areas, knees, elbows are really easy for kids to get hurt on, and they often have scrapes in these areas. Softer areas, such as your back, your cheeks, are a lot harder to get injuries. So these are places where if you see injuries, there might be red flags. It's also the story that the kids tell. If there's inconsistent or they don't give a story regarding where they got the injuries, that can be a cause for concern. Neglect is where a child isn't given the appropriate things or their needs aren't met appropriately. So you may have a child who comes with inappropriate clothing, who hasn't been bathed, doesn't have enough food, etc. Again, we don't jump to conclusions. Just because a child isn't wearing shoes doesn't mean they're neglected. It just might mean that they don't want to wear shoes that day. It's about looking at a number of red flags together and seeing it. So we may see that actually they haven't had their lunch come for 2 or 3 days in a row. They haven't got a drink bottle, their clothes are dirty, and so on. Sexual abuse, we often see children who have knowledge or sexual knowledge above what their age is. So they know things that a child of their age shouldn't know. Much of the indicators for sexual abuse can be similar to emotional abuse and sometimes physical abuse as well. We may see young people who are very withdrawn, or they also may be overly sexually active and sexual in how they interact with other people. Sometimes we may recognize signs and symptoms of abuse. Other times, children may disclose abuse to us. That's where they tell us that abuse is happening to them. They may start a conversation with us. They may tell a third person who then tells us. They may draw a picture or sing a song about it. It's important that we respond appropriately when children are telling us that they have been abused. So here are 6 basic rules for responding to children. The first is believing what they say. This is really important and means the children have confidence in you. It may have taken a long time for them to decide they're going to tell you something, and they have a lot of trust in you to do that. Say you are glad they told you. Say you are sorry it happened. Let them know it's not their fault. let them know you will help, and let them know that they are not the only one. If you've responded to the child, it's important that you then report it. Here is the WISE flowchart for reporting concerns of abuse. Firstly, the child has disclosed or you've suspected abuse, so you've responded to the child. You then need to report it. So you report to your manager. If a child was in immediate danger, the manager will phone 111. Your manager will then contact the safeguarding advisor, who will liaise with the CEO. And then the safeguarding advisor and the CEO will contact Oranga Tamariki and or the police. It's important to note we also have to record. So we record all disclosures, conversations, observations on a safeguarding incident form and submit it to the safeguarding manager. Here is a safeguarding incident form, which is to be completed by staff for all safeguarding incidents, suspicions or disclosures of child abuse. These forms are found on the intranet under the Safeguarding tab. On this form, you'll complete the child's details, parent caregiver details, which you can get from your manager from databases, and then you'll fill in the description of the safeguarding incident. So list any observations that may be relevant, what you saw or heard, record what, how, when and where, and include dates where possible. It's important that you only record what you saw or heard. You don't abbreviate anything, don't put words in anyone's mouth. There's a space to put any other comments you may have had, previous concerns, and also other background information that may be relevant. It's then completed by putting your name, your position, contact phone number, signature and date, and pass along to your manager, who will complete and then pass it along to senior management. We will then use these forms when we're passing them along to other organisations. If it's decided that a report of concern needs to be made to Oranga Tamariki, then a separate report of concern form will be completed. It's always hard to deal with any kind of child abuse concern, and so there are people across the organisation who can help you with advice. So the safeguarding advisor is Amy Morland, and her phone number and email are there. We also have safeguarding champions across the organisation. Stacey for Oscar, Jen for Oscar in the Hutt Valley, Danny for Oscar across Wanganui, Manawatu and Masterton, Gayleen for ECE, Robin for Camp, Stephen for Sport, and Natasha for Youth. You don't have to contact the champion for your area, but you can talk to someone who you feel comfortable with. They can give you advice and tell you what process to follow.